Good afternoon. I'm Honigstock, the Senior Director of Education at Urban Green Council. Urban Green's values are excellence, inclusion, collaboration, and engagement. We invite you to be mindful of views during the program, both when you're listening in and asking questions. So today's event we're very excited about today's event. I'd like to thank the New York City Accelerator for partnering with us on this. This is the second in a series about how to finance your energy upgrades. The first one a few weeks ago was one of the most widely shared videos in Urban Green history. So I invite you to look back at part one if you missed it. The event is scheduled to end at 2:15. So if you're going to miss any of it, we'll post the recording and the slides on the event page shortly after the event. So first, we're bringing up Andrew Chintz from the New York City Accelerator, and he'll lay out the context for equipment leases and as-a-service products. Then we'll hear from 4 speakers who represent companies that offer these products and can give us a more in-depth explanation of each one. And then after a very brief presentation from each speaker, we'll have a moderated discussion, and then it's your turn to ask questions. Please use the Zoom Q&A box to ask lots of questions throughout the presentation. And also please upvote other people's questions, because as the moderator, that tells me which questions are the most important to you. So now I'm happy to turn it over to Andrew Chintz, financing specialist from the New York City Accelerator.
Thank you, Ellen, and hello, everybody. As Ellen said, I'm the financing specialist from the New York City Accelerator. And I want to also thank Urban Green Council for partnering with us at the Accelerator on this very important topic. Our goals are aligned to decarbonize our building stock, and this collaboration effectively allows us to reach a much broader audience. So this webinar is a continuation of our part one. This is part two, where we will showcase additional financing options available to building owners for energy efficiency and or clean energy projects. And the reason we split this into 2 parts was just simply it was just too many products that it would have been too big of a panel to do it in one single session. We're gonna, like last time, provide a very high level overview of these financing options that exist in the market today. This is, in an effort to reach all building owners. And I'll just add that, when considering financing for your retrofit project, every building is different, conditions are different, financial status is always different. And the bottom line is just please reach out to New York City Accelerator, and we can get into a very detailed deep dive into your particular building. So you can go to the next slide, please. So the New York City Accelerator, I'll kind of review some of the things we spoke about in the first part, but very briefly. The Accelerator is a free service available to building owners. We provide customized various technical services to help you assess your building, figure out projects that you could do to make them more energy efficient, make them better performing, and avoid local law 97 penalties. So we provide a range of services. We can direct you to service providers, we can direct you to relevant incentive programs, and we also do training. Go to the next slide. So one of the services that we do is financing assistance, and that's where I would come in. You can go to the next slide. So as the financing specialist, the assistance we would do is look at your building with you, and when you're ready to do the financing or you need the financing, I would help you identify the various products that are out there that are relevant for your particular building, and then just help you connect to the lenders, help you navigate through the process, help you assess your options, generally just to be kind of a trusted advisor through the process. You can go to the next slide. So just kind of a basic slide. Why would people use financing for their energy upgrades. A lot of people look at debt as a kind of as a last resort and have an aversion to using debt, but it actually can be a very useful tool if it's used properly, and it actually can amplify the benefits of your energy efficiency investments by including making sort of accelerating the payback period. So it can be very useful. And the reasons we would use it is obviously it would minimize or eliminate the need for upfront funding. You can address local law 97 requirements, not only immediately, but we have long-term financing, and you can really look at a longer horizon and do a deeper retrofit. The financing can help a project that's not moving, it's stalled. Financing can help you preserve your building reserves so that you use them, you'll have them available for emergencies or for other capital needs. And if you are doing energy efficiency as well as other improvements, you can consolidate the financing in some cases, and it makes the overall cost of the financing more cost effective. And then the big kind of takeaway when we're doing energy efficiency improvements and we finance that, we often can get savings in our operating expenses, usually utility expenses or maintenance or even other things like property insurance premiums even can get lowered in some cases. And so this is a unique thing where you have this debt and you have to pay it back, but these savings can help you offset those payments, and even in some cases more than offset the payment and create net cash flow. You can go to the next slide. And when we just generally speaking, when we look at how to approach the financing for a particular the energy retrofit project, we kind of look at the building's life cycle. When a building is built or renovated or acquired, is usually a mortgage financing is associated with that. And we kind of look at the cycle when the mortgage is ready to mature. It's usually a time when the building needs to get when there are capital needs and there needs to be reinvestment in the building. So the first thing we look at is if it is at the end of the cycle and your mortgage is coming due in a year or two, that's the best place to look to finance your energy improvement projects. In some cases also, your lender might give you a supplemental mortgage. If you aren't at the end of that cycle or the mortgage is not maturing, you can get an additional mortgage. But most buildings are not at that stage. They're more at the mid-cycle. They're in the middle of their mortgage financing, and they don't necessarily want to go in and refinance that, especially today when rates have moved up so much. So a lot of our products are geared towards this mid-cycle stage. You can go to the next slide. So just as a kind of overview, we have the end of the building cycle, we have mortgage loans or green mortgage loans. We talked about this during part one. And then we have mid-cycle financing products. Again, we talked about these during our last webinar. We talked about PACE financing, and we talked about specialty finance companies like our local Green Bank and other mission-driven lenders that lend in this space. You can go to the next slide. So today we're going to continue that discussion, and we're going to talk about two more mid-cycle loan products. And we have a great group of providers of those products that are going to speak to them in more detail. But generally they are equipment loans or can be done as a lease. And it's basically just as it sounds, it's a loan or a lease for the equipment. It's usually more for a limited project scope. If you're just doing an equipment, solar panels or a new mechanical system, it's sort of limited to that only the equipment. And then we have another category of what we call non-debt financing solutions. And these are referred to as energy service agreements or power purchase agreement, or what's known as a service. And these are kind of a full service, all-inclusive contract. The service provider will come in and do an assessment. They'll often do an energy audit. They'll determine the kind of measures, energy conservation measures that you can do, kind of a holistic approach, whereas the equipment loan is really a single, more for a single, just the equipment. This is more of a holistic whole building approach. So you can combine all of those measures under one contract. The provider will not only plan it with you, but do the implementation, the construction, and they'll also finance it. So you won't take out the financing yourself as a building owner. And then they also stay on as in doing maintenance and any other needs. So it's full service, turnkey. The owner really doesn't have to do anything. They have no upfront costs. This is a product that we'll hear about from our panelists very soon. I think I just have one more slide after this. If you can go to the next slide. This is just a snapshot of our toolkit that we have, our financing toolkit from the New York City Accelerator. This is a way to help guide you through what financing options are available for your particular building. And again, it's just a kind of an overview, high level, and I'll just leave you with, please reach out to us because we can help you with very specific and with customized service for that. So with that, I will hand it over to Ross Reida at LED.Finance, and he will discuss equipment loans and equipment leases.
Thank you, Andrew, and my thanks to the team at Urban Green and NYC Accelerator for allowing us to be part of this discussion today. Just as a background, I've been in the equipment leasing business now. This is my 30th year in the business, and literally, financed anything from flight simulators to light bulbs, LED lights. So, I would just tag on to what Andrew said there, that the whole purpose of equipment leasing or financing is primarily to avoid the upfront cost. We got involved in the energy space in 2011. We started looking at commercial solar deals when the cost was $6.50 a watt, and didn't really make a lot of economic sense, but we were introduced to energy efficiency and got in on the very beginning of the commercialization of LED lighting. And what we learned was that the business proposition was really no different than any of the other equipment leasing situations that we've been faced with in the past. It's that the concept is to pay for the equipment as you use it rather than upfront, which is a great model for energy efficiency, in that generally the paybacks are tied to kWh and therm savings and other savings in the deal. So my role in this industry is as a broker intermediary, which is a little different, in that what we learned early on is that every deal is different. The technology is different. The building is different. The credit profile potentially is different, the structure of the company, and many, many different factors in each deal. So we learned that there's no one size fits all when it comes to financing these projects, but they all have a common theme, and that's to eliminate the upfront capital cost, which is always the biggest hurdle in any kind of efficiency project. Try to find the economic proposition that makes sense for the customer. Sometimes they're very, very cash flow positive, depending on the technology, and sometimes they're not. But again, the savings does help the payback on the deal. And again, my role is to understand the transaction who the delivery partner is. It could be a mechanical contractor, a lighting company. Understand the credit profile and really what the best solution is for the customer, and then to package that properly and present it to one of dozens of our funding partners that would be most likely to be a best fit for that particular deal. And as you can see by the projects there that are listed, it's a little dated. That should say Q1 2023. We typically work in what I call the lower middle market space, and that's generally deals in the $50,000 to maybe $1 million range. Although the first quarter of this year we have several seven-figure deals that we're working on that should come to fruition. So probably 95% of the transactions that I'm involved in financing are typically loans or leases. And then there are some that are a good fit for structuring as a service, energy efficiency as a service, or some form of power purchase agreement or other third-party owned type financing. So with that, Andrew, I think that's my presentation,
Sure.
and I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, thank you, Ross. And I'll just add that I often get questions talking about financing where, how long does it take to get the funding? What's the process like? And one thing that I would say about the equipment loan process is it's a very quick turnaround. It's a very easy process, which I think, sets it apart from some of the other loan programs. So I'll turn it over now for more on equipment loans and leases to Josh Patton at Verdant Capital.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me on. We really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to this crowd. This year, in the past, I'd say 15 months or so since I've been at Verdant, we've done more and more projects in New York City and the state of New York than I've probably done in my 18 years of equipment financing. So been doing a lot in this market. Been working with building owners, management companies, condos, co-ops, other multifamily customers, helping to provide financing with an equipment loan. Our product is typically written on what we call an equipment finance agreement, which means that you as the company actually owns the energy efficiency measures from day one of the transaction. And we just have a secured interest in that equipment for financing. So it's kind of the structure that we utilize. It works very well. And I'll talk a little bit about the ease of use and how that works a little later here. Talk a little bit about Verdant. Verdant Commercial Capital has been around for now 6 years. We fund a little over $500 million a year in financing. We have a couple different industries that we specialize in. Mine happens to be energy efficiency. We finance energy efficiency projects, renewables, as well as over the past 24 months, a lot of EV charging projects as well. In the state of New York, as I mentioned, we do have contracts with Con Edison, their small business and multifamily programs. We have an interest rate buy-down program. In those programs, we're one of the lenders for the Con Edison New York Clean Heat program. Obviously part of the New York City Accelerator, a lender for that program as well. And then in upstate New York, we also have a 3-year contract with National Grid for their C&I, small business, and New York Clean Heat financing programs. And that's another interest rate buy-down program that we have with those entities. Outside of that, around the country, we work specifically with utilities, working through their energy efficiency programs, typically providing us as financing options for their contractors that work those programs to be able to offer attractive, simple, easy financing for customers like you. Next slide, please. So a couple things that we offer that makes us a little bit different in the market. We do provide up to 100% pre-funding for the contractors that work this market. We typically work with the contractor and work with the building owner and the customer to find out what the terms are, what's necessary to pay up front. We handle those upfront payments, so you guys don't have to put a deposit up front to outlay cash for projects. We'll handle that and pay the contractors directly and work with their distribution of funds to make that work. We provide payment quoting tools to contractors to make it really easy for them to be able to offer the financing to you. It shows you exactly what interest rates work out to be, make it really simple to be able to offer aggressive financing. And then we do have interest rate buy down programs with a number of different utilities to be able to make it much more attractive than traditional financing that's out there. Little background about Verdant. There's really, I'd call it, let's talk about three specific types of lenders in the market. There are traditional asset-based lenders. This would be, your typical bank. They are looking for an asset that holds residual value to be able to offer financing. That's their protection, is the asset that's being financed. If the asset doesn't hold residual value, which oftentimes energy efficiency projects, think LED light bulbs, think rooftop HVAC units, boilers. It's really difficult to go and deinstall those in a situation where there's a default. And so the asset doesn't really hold a lot of value. But that's a traditional lender. And if they don't have that asset that holds the value, then what they typically require is a subordination on your existing mortgage or existing building loan to be able to make sure they secure an all asset blanket lien or something along those lines. And that's really difficult to maneuver through. Most lenders that are existing are not going to subordinate their loan. And it just makes it really difficult to move forward with projects there in traditional financing. That's why you don't see a whole lot of traditional banks in the space. Verdant and some other companies that we work with are more non-traditional. We're a private independent financing company. So we're private equity based and backed, which allows us to basically make our own rules, set up specific rules within specific industries. So in the energy efficiency space, we put programs together where it allows us to finance these measures without needing any sort of subordination. We're looking at the customer's credit rather than the asset of the amount we're financing to be able to offer financing. So we're looking at your ability to repay the loan, and oftentimes we utilize the energy savings that the contractor provides us to be able to give that as a credit enhancement to be able to move forward with a project. We have about a 95% approval ratio with the projects that have been submitted through our programs in the energy space. So we approve a lot of transactions, and we get to a point where we're comfortable moving forward with that, even if the asset is not necessarily a strong point in the deal. And the third really product would be the as a service product. And I'll leave that to the other individuals on this call to dive more deeply into that. That's also another good product that allows you to acquire and be able to have upfront measures installed without that upfront cost that goes along with that. On our side of things, we really focus on basically projects between 25,000 and 100 million. But honestly, most of my projects are anywhere between 25,000 and 5 million. That's where most of the projects fall within our purview here. Our terms are anywhere between 24 or 84 months, so up to 7 years. We do have the option to amortize over 10 years and have a balloon payment, set up a 7-year loan with a balloon payment, but amortize over 10 years is an option if we need that payment lower. Usually that's required or requested when there's a deeper dive energy efficiency project that has multiple measures. We have the ability to finance app only up to $500,000. So literally an application submitted, we're able to quickly turn that around, usually 2 to 4 hours. we have an answer back and can move forward with the financing up to $500,000. If there's not enough business credit behind it, then sometimes we will ask for some financial statements or some tax returns to help us get comfortable there. But our app-only product makes it really easy to do business with us. I have as-a-service financing bundles. Some of the contractors we work with offer as-a-service, different than the as-a-service than you're going to be hearing about today from some of the lenders on the field here. The as-a-service financing that we provide, those contractors will also have a maintenance contract that's in there that we also finance. So that's what they consider as-a-service. And I mentioned our large credit box, again, 95% approval ratio. Last 15 months that we've been financing in the space. So it makes it really easy to move forward with financing. Our team is listed below there. I head up the team, and there's also Chris Herman and John Wickersham that works throughout some of the different utility programs. These are all contacts for the Con Edison programs as well. And back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Josh. So those are our two representatives from the equipment lending and leasing products. As you can see that there's overlap among these different products. The as a service is somewhat like a lease, and you'll hear more about that. Just as a little more introduction on that, I was mentioning it's the as a service is an all-inclusive contract. It gets paid back in a single contract for all the services, and sometimes the payments are covered by the savings from the work, and that's the way a lot of these are structured. But just as a little more background, these were done many years ago and continue to be with larger institutional building owners like universities or hospitals or school districts. They referred to them more as energy service contracts. They now are evolving more to buildings that we're all working with, and even down to multifamily buildings. And this term as a service is how they're referred to. But you know, you'll hear more now about these products. We have the two Brians talking about as a service, and our first Brian, Nieves, is going to be speaking from NORESCO.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And thank you to the Urban Green Council and the New York City Accelerator for inviting me here today. Just want to give a quick shout out to the Urban Green Council. I attended their spring member reception about 2 weeks ago over at 7 World Trade Center. Really great event. If you haven't attended one of these events prior, you know, I would highly suggest attending some of the events. And of course, great to see many of my former colleagues over at the Accelerator. It's great to see some familiar names and faces on this call. Next slide, please. So NORESCO, we've been helping customers for over 39 years to implement efficiency and infrastructure modernization projects. NORESCO is part of the Carrier Global Corporation, and Carrier was founded in 1915. We are a publicly traded company, Fortune 200. You know, one thing I like to point out, 39 years, that's quite a long time. NORESCO was doing energy projects when I was a toddler. That's what that means. So it's really a testament to the longevity and the stability of our company. Next slide, please. So X as a service. When I say X as a service, it can be a number of different things. It could be energy as a service. It can be compliance as a service, infrastructure as a service. Basically, it's all the same type of business model. And so when I'm just going to walk you through now, you know, the different steps associated in X as a service. So first, there's the investor partnership. Now, NORESCO would partner with an investor. We have relationships with a number of different lenders where we'll partner with the investor and they'll own the project asset. The next step would be for us to help facilitate agreements with the different stakeholders. After that, the investor and the customer, they would have a contract. So the customer has a single agreement with the investor for the project and to finance the project. NORESCO then helps to fulfill the obligation. So the investor would then contract with NORESCO to develop and help to implement the project. The customer then would pledge a percentage of the project savings. So many of you are probably familiar with the energy performance contracts, which is a space that NORESCO has worked in for several years, where the energy savings or the cost savings of the projects help to repay. Very, very similar concept here with the as a service business model. Which brings me to the payment performance. So the payments are contingent on verified project performance. So we are going to assure that the payments are going to help pay us back, or pay the investor back for the project. Now, an advantage of the X as a service, it could potentially be favorable from an accounting and debt treatment perspective, because it is off balance sheet. Now, I would caution, we are not here to provide financial advice. We would certainly advise you to speak to your accountants and different financial advisors, because each building is unique, and the different ownership structures, and there's different tax implications associated with engaging in as a service. So fair market value asset transfer. So at the end of the term, there's options that exist for the asset to be purchased by the customer at fair market value. So the best way to think of this is a car lease, right? When you engage in leasing a car, they put a residual value and that's the price in which you can purchase the car at the end of the term. Similar concept here for the equipment that we may install. And last but not least, for those that may be familiar with power purchase agreements, it's the same type of structure. And power purchase agreements are typically used for renewable projects. Next slide, please. So this is the Accelerated Compliance Assistance Plan, or the pathway. One thing I would like to add, we as NORESCO, not only are we able to provide financing options such as a service, but we are a contractor as well. So we can do the energy audit, develop the whole plan, act as a general contractor or construction manager, right through project implementation and the verification M&V at the end. And so there's advantages of working with a company like us, because we're a single source contact, or kind of a one throat to choke, so to speak. So we're there to see the project through completion. So first would be the preliminary assessment and analysis. So this would be our initial discussion. We may request to see energy audit reports such as Local Law 87 to get a sense of what type of equipment you have in the building. We would look at potential Local Law 97 fines, and then we would also have initial discussions with regards to financing. The next step would be a detailed analysis or an IGA. So one thing I would like to point out, there is a difference between an energy audit and an IGA. An IGA will actually, an IGA you can build off of. So you have contractor pricing, you have material pricing, you have drawings, things of that sort. So the IGA is something that we would develop and then present to the customer. And if the customer does wish to proceed, we would ask that they sign what's called a letter of intent. So if we're going to expend time and resources in developing, an IGA and a scope of work, there would be a letter of intent associated. And at the end, we certainly would like to see the building proceed, but if for some reason the building doesn't want to proceed, even though we get them under the Local Law 97 threshold, then that the drawings or the IGA is theirs. little short on time now, but the next step would be for us to develop a contract development and the financing, construction training and commissioning. So we would act as a general contractor or a construction manager to oversee the entire process that the subs execute and install what we specified to install. And last but not least would be the measurement and verification to assure that the project is under those thresholds associated with local law 97. With that, thank you. I'd like to turn it back to Andrew.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so it's a very interesting concept, and we will have our next, by the way, just in trying to keep this all very high level, for those of you who don't know, IGA is an investment grade audit, energy audit. So that was the differences that Brian was speaking to. So our next speaker will be Brian McCommon from Metrus Energy, and he will talk about another form of an as-a-service product.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course, the internet goes out right on my time, so it's perfect timing here. So sorry about that. Appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. Brian McCommon with Metrus Energy. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity here. So we can go to the next slide. All right, so just to kind of step through how Metrus works, as Brian was just mentioning, we're just on the finance side of the equation here. We offer energy as a service or energy efficiency as a service for C&I, healthcare, and higher education are kind of the most successful places that we live in. So let's start here. How does our role with the customer? So we fund 100% of the cost of the upgrade, the efficiency of the equipment, and to add smart technology. So how does that help a customer out? And so the customer gets new upgraded equipment for zero out of pocket. And, as of 2019, any lease is considered an on-balance sheet. So our as-a-service offer, due to the ownership and operations being held by Metrus, could be looked at as an off-balance sheet solution from a tax perspective. All right, if we go down to number 2, we leverage the savings from strategically bundled energy and water measures to fund the customer's wish list of upgrades. The customer gets the net zero goals are accelerated with the energy efficiency scaled across the portfolio and stepping down to number 3. So as I mentioned, we own the equipment. So what we do here, we partner with the contractors on the implementation, maintenance, and project performance reporting. So the customer at that point is really only paying for the realized savings of the project. Next slide, please. Okay, so typical project, I think this will give everybody a pretty good idea. Around $1 million is our starting point. We can go north of 10 million, but most of our projects sit in the $1 million to 10 million mark. Bundling is a benefit to as a service. You could take some really attractive payback measures and kind of mush them together with, say, some longer term paybacks to get something that's reasonable term. A typical weighted payback that we find attractive is, a 5 to 10 year weighted payback. And then our sustainable energy service agreement, that's the project term, and those are generally between 7 and we can go out to 20. The ideal target, as I mentioned a minute ago, is the C&I, the higher education, and the healthcare system. All right, next slide, please. Okay, wanted to include this just to kind of give a visualization because it is a pay-for-performance realized savings model. There is going to be an energy shared percentage that's established and agreed upon at the beginning of the contract negotiations, and that percentage is variable. It's going to it's going to vary by project to project. So if the customer says, "Hey, we will only take a 7-year term," that gives us a target of understanding, hey, we only want a 7-year contract. We're going to need to change the energy savings percentage to X. Are we agreed upon that? But I think this chart here just kind of does a pretty good job from a visual standpoint, showing, this is a 10-year term. That bluish, greenish bar there, sorry, I'm a little colorblind. It shows the energy savings service charge that you'll pay to Metrus, and you'll get the remaining percentage of the savings. And then after the term, fair market value gives the customer opportunity to buy those assets, whether it be just light bulbs or light bulbs and boilers and HVAC or whatever, for a fair market value that's established early on in the project. So if that's the case, they will have all the energy savings based upon the buyout of that equipment. Okay, there's some other stuff on the left-hand side here. I can't touch on most of it here, but at the end of the day, we live in the as-a-service market to where we finance the projects. We're agnostic on the product. We use our vast network of ESCO partners around the country to implement the right program. And I think that's my last slide there. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. It's perfect timing.
No worries. Thank you, Brian. Yes,
Yeah.
I think we're ready to go to our moderated questions. I'm just going to add one comment on the as-a-service product. I know we usually have a lot of multifamily attendees, co-ops and condos particularly, and this product now is available, I think, at least for some of these providers that will do multifamily space as well.
Thank you so much. That was great. If everyone can turn on your cameras, we're gonna basically start off the Q&A, so it gives our audience some time to put their questions into the Q&A box. We've gotten some good questions already, and please, don't hesitate to ask questions and upvote others. All right, so let's jump right into this. My first question is for Andrew, just as a to level set. When should buildings consider this kind of equipment lease or as a service product versus more traditional financing products that we highlighted in part 1 of this series?
Yeah, so I think some of this has come out in these discussions, presentations. I think a main issue here or reason would be, when you're doing the lease or as a service, which is really like a lease, you don't own the equipment, so it's a much simpler role to play as the owner. You just pay the lease. You don't have to really take care of anything. So if that's of interest, that would be one reason. And then related to that, since you don't own it, you're not financing it, it's off balance sheet, meaning that you're not taking out a loan and that doesn't go on the balance sheet as debt for the organization. So that might be a driver as well. This sort of comes up, sort of another reason why you might not want to own or take out the debt is if you're a nonprofit entity, many of these measures have tax benefits or tax credits, and as a nonprofit entity, you don't pay taxes, so you can't benefit from that. So that's another reason you might see nonprofits doing solar, and they'll do it as a power purchase agreement, a PPA, instead of owning the equipment because they can't take those tax benefits. And that should result in them receiving some positive, because the owner of the equipment, in this case, the solar, is going to take those tax benefits. So they should get some benefit some other way in the transaction. So yeah, I think those are kind of some basic reasons why you would go this direction.
Thanks, Andrew. Ross, can you just in a nutshell explain the difference between the equipment lease and as a service product, and what are sort of the main differences?
Well, sure. I think Andrew touched on it. Is that the first characteristic is who owns the equipment. And in a lease or loan product, those are intended for customer ownership, as opposed to a service agreement where the service provider owns the equipment and they're taking the operational risk of the equipment as well. I think that's the first characteristic, is ownership. And in a lease loan, I think Josh touched on it actually, is that, you know, it's really a credit decision. It's not a collateral decision. We all know that once these measures are installed in a building, it's highly unlikely that any lender is going to go and try to recover, you know, that type of an asset. So in the as a service model, they have the credit, you know, the credit risk and the operating risk of the system. So it's much more important, in my opinion, for both Brian's. You know, they have some skin in the game when they're underwriting those projects from a performance standpoint, because they're taking on, you know, that risk. The last thing is just how the project is accounted for by the customer. And Andrew mentioned this, that he used the term off balance sheet, because the asset doesn't reside on the customer's balance sheet. Therefore, they can expense that payment as an operating expense versus a capitalized cost on their balance sheet. So those are the three main characteristics, I think, that distinguish the difference between those two types of finance.
Think you very much. That was very clear. Really
Yeah,
appreciate it. Oh, do you want to add something?
Just jump in. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but I think another thing to think about with the lease versus as a service, and as you've been hearing, the as a service is really a holistic building approach, and you're combining lots of measures, and you can get benefits from measures with lots of savings. You can combine those without a lot of savings and make it more of a whole building product. So maybe with the equipment lease, it's really just the equipment.
Okay, thank you. Question for Brian Nieves. What's the ideal situation from the owner's perspective for using an as-of-service product, like are specific building types or project types or building sizes that could benefit the most? With Brian, you're
Sorry, I was muted.
there. You go.
But I am here. Okay. So, you know, we would look mostly to a larger commercial industrial type of projects. You know, remember there's a whole process associated with putting together the as a service type of agreement. Again, we would do like an investment grade audit where we develop a detailed scope of work, identify or assure the customer that we are able to get them under the greenhouse gas emissions thresholds for local law 97, whether they're due 2024, 2030, or so on. And you know, as Ross mentioned, you know, we're taking the performance risk. We have skin in the game. So you know, our engineers, they're very thorough. You know, I look at their names. I see 26 letters after the last name. I call it alphabet soup sometimes, but you know, they are very thorough and very and we have to be. We have to be. You know, even in our name, we're sometimes referred to as no risk ESCO. And so, you know, that just speaks to you know, how thorough we are in developing the projects and moving it from, you know, conception right through to the M&V phase. So
Thank you. Question for Brian McCommon. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of the as a service product and where it stands today? Because it's been a lot of change in the last few years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, if we, you know, Metrus started about 14, 15 years ago. So, you know, there's a lot of the pioneering of the as a service. If you look at it from across the country, you know, there are some as a service contracts that are going out to 30 years. lots of big universities. And then you see everything from just lighting as a service or HVAC as a service. So, that transition of, being creative and not just saying, hey, we're looking at one measure, let's try to bundle as many as we can together, is a unique approach. And then from an as a service standpoint, depending upon the profile of the customer, if they have, say, multi-sites and they want to do multi-measures, we can bundle all those together under one main service contract. And then we could break those out based upon the performance and the efficiency improvements on those measures.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to turn to audience questions. So I'm going to start at the top. There's a couple of questions in here about what are typical interest rates. So Lauren Flowers' question is, what are the current typical interest rates on equipment loans or equipment financing? And there's another question lower down on just where are rates now? So who, any of you can answer or jump in here.
I can take that question there. So typically for equipment financing, rates are going to depend on the size of the transaction and the term. Typically in equipment financing, it's a little bit different than, say, mortgages, right? So usually the longer the term, the lower the rate is going to be. And typically, obviously, the higher the dollar amount, the lower the rate is going to be as well. So there's kind of a matrix of rates that are offered. But you can look at this and say that for the most part, it's high sevens up into nowadays potentially in the low double digits. That's just the nature of the market right now, where rates have gone. If you would ask me that same question at this time last year, I would have been talking about rates in the fives. But rates have increased pretty significantly over this past year, and this is the new norm. However, there's good news because lenders like us, we partner with utilities who already have budgets for incentives, and we tap into these budgets. For instance, Con Edison and their small business and their multifamily program, we tap into these budgets and they provide us a subsidy on top of the incentives that are being offered to be able to buy those rates down. So for instance, in Con Ed's SMB and multifamily, we offer 0% financing for 24 months, 1.99% for 36-month projects, 3.49% for 48 months, and 3.99% for 60-month projects. So there's some relief to the higher interest rates that are out there through some of these utility buy down programs.
Okay, can any others of you speak to where interest rates are, or does Josh's answer sort of track for all of you?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add on to that, and Josh nailed it. I mean, for the as a service, I think Andrew mentioned earlier, the credit profile has a bit to do with the percentage that we can tie to the project as well. So if it's a really high credit rating at Moody's, we can get really aggressive with our pricing.
Okay. So as a follow-on to Josh's answer, we have a question from Bill McCracken. To what extent, if at all, can any of the panelists assist owners in pursuing tax credits and incentives alongside financing options?
I will jump in if no one else wants to. So typically, Verdant and our team, we work with contractors directly. Of course, we are involved in programs like the New York Accelerator, where customers come directly to us, but oftentimes we have those relationships with various different contractors, and we're working with them oftentimes through that utility incentive program to be able to help you present what incentives are available. If there's tax credits, let's say it's a solar project, that probably wouldn't be through a utility program, but we can help you with the incentives for the tax project for the solar projects. Andrew, I know you mentioned nonprofits not being able to take advantage of those taxes. That's actually changed this year with the Inflation Reduction Act. There's now direct payments or direct payments that are available for up to 30% for solar projects, where they can take advantage of those tax credits by having direct pay directly from the IRS now. So there is some benefits for nonprofits to do debt financing now as well.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. That's correct. I meant to mention that. Also, I'll just mention too that the New York City Accelerator is an available service to Bill's question, to help you with the incentive programs, all the relevant incentive programs we can help direct you to. And, you know, we would work with you in conjunction with the financing. So we kind of look at, once you know all the incentives you're going to get, we would look to finance that net amount after that. Or if you need to finance the whole thing until the incentives come in, some of the financing programs will do that. But my main point is that the accelerator can help with incentives, as well as the other services.
Okay, anyone else want to add to that?
I'll jump in. So, you know, with regards to the tax deductions and credits, yes. You know, as many have mentioned, the IRA has changed things. We could look at EPAC 179D, which is another deduction that can help pay and offset the costs of a project. And as Andrew mentioned, you know, there's an abundance of utility incentive programs. There's the commercial industrial, there's multifamily, there's the affordable housing multifamily, there's SMB, small to medium business, there's clean heat. So, you know, really, when you're utilizing or taking advantage of these incentive programs, you know, we as NORESCO, we would take payment, the incentive payment, so that as partial form of payment, so that would offset the cost of what you would actually have to finance. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind as well.
Okay, I want to follow up the question, I think for Andrew. You know, our advice is go to the accelerator and they will help you with all of these things, but it's very complex from a financial perspective. What other consultants should a building check in with or have available when they're working with you to figure all this stuff out?
Yeah, so I guess, you know, when it comes to the tax credits, for instance, we will help you, for instance, with solar, and we will show what those tax credits are. But in terms of when you actually are taking the credits, you know, you hear this a lot, but the owners really need to go to their accountant. They're the ones that really understand their building and really know the tax laws. So I guess the accountants are one source. And I think we have, the accelerator has a network of service providers that we have vetted. And within that list are many different consultants, energy auditors. Those are also sources that are knowledgeable about these programs and can help owners.
So if a building doesn't already have those consultants, the accelerator can help connect them. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on to building envelopes. This is a great question from Jason Kowinski. Thank you, Jason. Are building envelope improvements able to be included in such financing or done as standalone? And this touches on local law 11 as well as local law 97 related stuff in most cases.
Yes, I'll answer all the questions if you want. Absolutely. Building envelope, you know, windows, insulation, roof, you know, all the different options within that category can be financed. Basically anything that's incentivized by a utility is able to be financed. So that's kind of the general rule. But yes, it absolutely can be. And they typically require longer terms if you want to make it cash flow positive. So sometimes it doesn't make as much sense on the debt financing side. Maybe that's more of a as a service type of solution if you want to match up your cash flows to be able to have the energy savings match up with the outlays that you have. Okay,
so a follow-up question to that. So like for PACE financing, you have to show certain performance, and so some things it might be harder to finance. I'm thinking is the background for that question. And then the next question is there a minimum level of performance guaranteed after installation, actually equipment performance? So it's about equipment loans guaranteed after installation. And is this included with the project financing?
On the debt side, there's not. We do not require a project to be cash flow positive. There are lots of instances, for instance, in the Con Edison multifamily program, there might be an ROI on a lighting project, in the common areas that is, 4 years. That might take 4 years to be a payback on that. However, the building owner may want to take advantage of the 24 months at 0% financing option. Even though the payback doesn't match up with the term being offered, we're fine with that. It's not a requirement to make that work. It does work as a credit enhancement sometimes. Let's call it a gray area deal where credit might look at a transaction and say that's kind of on the fence of being approved or not. Using that, those energy savings and the expected savings from the measures that are being installed will oftentimes get a credit analyst over the top to be able to approve a transaction, but it's not a requirement in our transactions.
Okay, any other responses about M&V, measurement and verification? Or performance?
Well, since the as a service is a pay for performance model, you know, there are other ways to factor in besides just the raw energy savings, like the avoided cost of maintenance over the 5 to 10 year term. As long as those percentages can be factored in, it can't be a vast majority of savings. But, you know, when we look at what we call maybe non-energy savings portions of it, as long as the customer's comfortable and we can put that into a contract, we can say, hey, you know, 90% of the energy savings is going to pay for this. The avoided cost of maintenance is going to tack in another 10% of savings to help with the economics of the project. Again, every project is going to be so different that we have to look at it individually. We just can't put a blanket statement on it.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so this is a question from Graham Higgins, and I'm going to direct it to Brian Nieves. What are the key characteristics that distinguish an investment grade audit from an ASHRAE level 1, 2, or 3 audit? Does it involve a building energy model or other performance-based simulations?
Sure. So again, an ASHRAE level 2 audit, that's something that's required for local law 87 or at a minimum. And, you know, the calculations typically use like means data, whereas an IGA, an investment grade audit, we would go out and have contractors walk the site and provide quotes, you know, hard numbers. We'd also do drawings. An IGA you can actually build off of, and where an audit, you can't necessarily bring an ASHRAE level 2 audit to construction. So that would really be the difference amongst the two.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much. All right, so we have a question from Kevin George for the Bryans. Does your financing include stacked funding opportunities from NYSERDA or Con Ed or National Grid? How are these opportunities integrated into the as a service offer?
All right, I'll jump in again. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we would look to maximize any incentives, whether they be offered to Con Edison, NYSERDA, and that could help offset the cost of the project. And then we would look to finance the balance of the project. So really, we're looking at any and every source of dollars or monies to be able to put towards the project. We want to lower the net cost to the customer as low as possible. We'd also look, as I mentioned, the tax deductions or tax credits. There's many different funding avenues or mechanisms to help pay for the project. So we would look at anything and everything.
Great, thank you. And Brian McCommon?
Yeah, no, Brian nailed it. I mean,
Awesome.
If
Love
there's
that.
any money being given out there, let's take it. We look
Perfect.
at it as like a down payment of the project, kind of.
Perfect. Okay, so I have a question I'd like to direct to Ross. The question is, what percentage of clients take up the option to purchase the equipment at the end of the contract? It seems like it could be a sticking point if the client doesn't have the money to purchase the equipment. And is that an issue?
I'd say 99.9% because, what Josh and I primarily do are fully amortized deals where we're not taking a residual position on the equipment. I think that might have gotten confused with one of Brian's answers about fair market value purchase on the equipment at the end of the term, which is a typical feature of a service agreement. But in a lease loan, those are typically fully amortized for the term. You might see a small residual, 10% or something like that, but it may be more common in what we do solar tax leases, and those are typically about a 15% fair market value residual on the back end, but 90+% of the deals that are done are fully amortized.
Okay, thank you. I think you may have answered, several of you have answered this earlier, but there's a question from Caitlin Moore about how the New York City DOB permitting process is handled. But I would imagine that's separate from the work that you do, unless it's not. Can you comment on that? Like, who does the permitting process?
So the process in terms of setting up the permits is typically handled through the contractor directly, who's doing the install. The costs of those permits are typically rolled into the financing. Equipment financing, at least on our side of things, can be 100% financing, meaning that the whole project, the equipment, the installation, if there's a maintenance contract, permitting, you name it, it can all be rolled into the amount that's being financed.
Okay. One question about Urban Green's favorite topic. I keep hearing boilers, but are we not going for electrification in general? And do electrification projects get any particular support in any way?
On the equipment side, or on the equipment lending side, we'll finance any type of equipment, any measures. Of course, we see a lot more of electrification, see a lot more heat pumps these days. But we will still finance any type of equipment that is necessary to move forward.
But any incentives isn't coming from you guys, it's coming from elsewhere then.
So there are, for instance, through the Con Edison financing program, for multifamily specifically, they will allow low and moderate income or heat pumps to be bought down and utilize the interest rate. Whereas outside of that, they're not. So I guess that's the one extra benefit, that heat pumps that are low and moderate income can also qualify for the interest rate buy down in National Grid territory.
Thank you. So there's a question about credit criteria and what credit criteria is used to qualify the projects.
Ross, you want to take that? Or you want me to
Yeah.
jump in?
Well, I was going to say that's a very difficult
you.
question to answer in one. There's so many different credit categories, from SMB to investment grade, large, C&I credits, to, like Josh just mentioned, low to medium income multifamily housing. The underwriting criteria is different for each of those verticals, and also project type. But the guys that are taking service risk on service agreements are going to underwrite those deals a little more closely than Josh and I do. Let's say we're doing a $200,000 deal for your typical C&I credit. It's pretty much what we call canned underwriting or credit scoring model, because we're not taking that operating risk. So again, I think the criteria is particular to the project, the size, the scope, and the type of credit we're dealing with. Whether it's most of the co-ops are nonprofits. They're not in business to make money. And when you see financial statements from a nonprofit, you'll see they don't typically underwrite to your traditional commercial lending criteria. So you have to take into account assessments and other characteristics of getting that project underwritten. So there's no single answer to it. It just really truly depends on the type of customer and the characteristics of the project.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. On a high level, there's a few things that can quickly put an approval together. As lenders like Ross and I, what we do is we run a Dun & Bradstreet report. We run a PayNet, which would show any leases and loans. And again, if it's an operating company that has a Dun & Bradstreet report, right, they'll have some business credit behind it that makes it really easy to put an approval together within minutes. If there's not, let's say it's just an LLC for a building, or any sort of operating company that doesn't have Dun & Bradstreet, which is fine. In those instances, we may ask for some additional information, a couple years of tax returns. And in that case, if it's a building, we're going to look at the assets of that building, what kind of equity is in there, and combine that with the energy savings for the project to help us get us over that hump to put approval together. And it works pretty well. Like I mentioned, we have about a 95% approval ratio looking at it from that standpoint. So that's
Okay.
a quick, easy.
All right, thank you. And I'm apologies for that being such a difficult question. All right, so we're down to the last few minutes. So I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions in a sort of lightning round. So this is retrofits. You all finance work in retrofits. That's right. That's what the accelerator is there for. Yes. Anyone? Okay. New construction. Is this okay? See one. Yes. Okay. Elevator modernization. Is that an appropriate project for your financing? I'm seeing some yeses there. Okay. How about an electric heat pump, hot water equipment for domestic use in a multifamily building? Would that be big enough? I see yes from Brian Nieves. That's awesome. Maybe some other neutrals and yeses. Okay. There are some other questions in here that are project specific, and I think your best bet for those is to reach out to the accelerator, and they will direct you to the right people. Thank you so much. This was, with all of these, I learned so much every time. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic event, and we appreciate all of your participation. We're gonna close things out now. We have some upcoming, as always, Urban Green has upcoming events. The next event is Urban Green Live, Pathways to Electrification with the incomparable Ian Shapiro. That's on April 19th at 10 a.m. We welcome you to join live and ask your questions. And you can register for all Urban Green events at our website. Thank you again. This was fantastic. And thank you again to the Accelerator. This has been a fruitful partnership that we're excited to continue to do. There will be more. If you missed part one, please go back to the website and watch it. It was as good as this one. The slides and a recording of this event will be available soon on our website, and we'll email everyone who registered as soon as they're ready. And thank you very much for attending, and have a great day.